The American Bar Association has just passed a shocking new rule that could make it very difficult for religious attorneys to practice law. Here with me to talk about this is Ken Klukowski from the First Liberty Institute. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Abby.
So Ken, can you just tell us what is this rule?
This is ABA Model Rule 8.4, which makes it a legal ethics violation for a lawyer to engage either in conduct or verbal conduct, meaning your speech, or to have business or social activities that anyone believes shows discrimination on anyone on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, as well as the normal categories of race, sex, etc. But this rule is written so broadly that anything that I, as an attorney, discuss with someone over coffee or at a restaurant, or anything I say if I'm teaching Sunday school at church, all of those are social activities that could be used, if I'm speaking about those issues, to say that me or any other Christian attorney is actually engaging in unethical conduct for which we could be disbarred and banned from being able to practice law.
So now not only are they going after the people who are fighting these religious liberty cases, but they're going after the lawyers who are representing them.
Absolutely, and this would impact any Christian lawyer or lawyers of other faiths, such as Orthodox Jews, no matter what kind of law you represent, because again, if you're teaching in your house of worship, any of that could be used to say that you're engaged in unethical conduct. But also, let's say you're a liberal atheist lawyer. You're not going to take on representation for churches, ministries, Christians, because how can you talk about your case without having bar authorities come after you? So this is an attempt to purge observant Christians and other conservatives of faith from the legal profession, and to make all attorneys, all other attorneys in the profession, fearful about taking on representation for people of faith or conservatives in general. This is unprecedented. Nothing of this nature has ever been done. It is a gross violation of the First Amendment, both of lawyers and of their clients.
So how did this get passed, and who are the people who voted on it, and how many people even voted for it?
It was the ABA House of Delegates that voted for it just yesterday on August 8th. This has been in the works for months. There was an ethics committee which was debating the rule. They heard testimony from their leaders. The ABA president spoke. There were committee members that spoke. They spoke about the need to end bias in discrimination, to wipe out bias that they say lawyers might not even be aware that they hold. So they knew exactly what they were doing by doing this. This is such an extraordinary violation of the First Amendment that it's led former U.S. Attorney General Ed Meese to come out calling this rule fascist, which I think is a term that raises specters of the past that an attorney general, I think, is very reluctant to ever use. But the ABA has voted on it, and so now this matter goes to the highest court of each state for them to decide whether to make it a legally binding requirement on the entire legal profession within that state.
How will this affect the ongoing religious liberty cases, and how will it affect the future for religious liberty?
Well, if I were speaking to you on air right now about any of my clients involved in religious liberty issues or same-sex marriage or gender issues or even abortion, since someone could say that talking about abortion is a form of sex discrimination against women, people could file any of your listeners could file an ethics complaint in any of the states where I'm licensed, where I could lose my law license, and then my clients are left without a lawyer. I mean, it is impossible to overstate how unprecedented this is in American law and how dangerous this is, because popular speech, if you're talking about baseball or apple pie, no one ever comes after you for that. It's only unpopular speech that is not politically incorrect, that's not politically correct. It's only for that kind of speech that you need legal protection, that you need to be able to protect your rights in court. This is an effort to end all that. And if your viewers go to firstliberty.org, they can read all the shocking details about this.
So what is First Liberty and other organizations doing to fight this?
Well, now we have no choice. Originally, Attorney General Meese and Kelly Shackelford, who's president of First Liberty Institute, filed a joint letter with the ABA explaining why this violates the First Amendment, why this must end. Now that the ABA has decided to move forward on this, We have no choice. We'll have to go to the highest courts of each of the 50 states and the District of Columbia, making the case to them as to why this violates the First Amendment, because they are bound by the Constitution, just like any government actor is. Why adopting this would violate the First Amendment, and for any states that do adopt this, we need to be prepared to litigate in federal court and take this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, because lawyers have First Amendment rights too, and more importantly than that, tens of millions of Americans depend on being able to get good lawyers to represent them and protect their rights.
How many lawyers do you think will fight this?
It's hard to say. There's 1.3 million lawyers in America. Less than a third of those are ABA members. The American Bar Association, which is a private organization, is well known as a very liberal organization. Unfortunately, it's not surprising that they adopted this rule. But I think that lawyers are now going to be in a very tough spot, because if you're at a big law firm, the management committee is just going to tell all of its members, stay away from this stuff. Don't drag the law firm before a disciplinary commission, before a state Supreme Court on charges of unethical conduct. Because even if the ethics complaint fails, the fact that you were publicly investigated, that's a public record. There are public hearings. Word like that gets out into the press, and it can destroy a lawyer's career. It can damage a firm's reputation. This is designed to have a chilling effect on the entire legal profession, to stay away from issues of abortion, marriage, gender, protecting churches. This is designed to say we're gonna purge those people from the legal profession and make those who are left unwilling to represent people and institutions of faith going forward. Again, you can't make this stuff up. This has never been done in 200 years of American history, and that's why at firstliberty.org we lay out all the details of this, because Abby, most people just cannot imagine that this kind of oppressive censorship regime could ever move forward in a country like America.
This seems like it's going to be a very long legal process for you all to fight it. So what is going to happen in the meantime? And you represent a lot of religious liberty cases right now. Are you nervous, and what will happen with those?
Well, ultimately, as a Christian, my faith is in God, and there are dear brothers and sisters in the Lord all over the world who are dealing with violent persecution, to say nothing of this. As someone who has traveled the world and been to countries where they don't have the same religious liberty that we have, if you look at the plight that believers in those countries face, this I fear leads us to a slippery slope. Where Christians will be increasingly ostracized from society, where you're purging observant Christians from the entire legal profession, which is the whole third branch of government. You can't have a court case if you don't have a lawyer to represent you before a court. This is something to be gravely concerned about. And whether or not First Amendment challenges to this rule for states that adopt it, whether or not those challenges succeed, may ultimately be decided by who fills the Supreme Court seat left vacant by the death of Justice Antonin Scalia. So the outcome of November's election could be central to whether or not Christians in America and people of other faiths are able to get good legal representation, and whether people of faith are still welcome in the legal profession.
So how important is this election?
This election, this country is facing challenges like we've never seen in 200 years. Many rights that you and I take for granted have been hanging by just a single vote at the U.S. Supreme Court. I say that as someone who's been involved in a dozen cases before the High Court. And outcomes that many Americans don't focus on because they thought was so common sense. They don't realize many of those were just 5 to 4 decisions. You flip one vote, and you are designing a country far different than what any of us have ever grown up in.
So there are a lot of Republicans coming out, they came out last week and more adding to the list, who don't like Donald Trump so much that they are now saying they will vote for Hillary despite the fact that they've been Christian conservatives. And now they're saying they're going to vote for someone who her platform is pro-choice. And she is promising to appoint Supreme Court judges who will go against everything the religious liberty movement fights for. What do you say to them?
Well, First Liberty Institute is a 501c3 organization, so we don't make any endorsements or oppose or support any candidate for federal office. That said, for informational purposes, I would say that Donald Trump has put forward a list of potential Supreme Court nominees that he would put forward. Those are all outstanding picks. Some of them I'm bigger cheerleaders of than others, but all 11 are absolutely wonderful conservatives, versus Hillary Clinton's short list is also emerging. And it's a bunch of hardline liberals who I think would be very likely, certainly on questions like abortion and marriage, would be taking a liberal view, and that we don't even know where they would stand on these sorts of free speech issues. So I would think that anyone at this point, maybe they weren't a fan of Donald Trump to start with, maybe they don't know what they're going to get from Donald Trump, but they know exactly what they're going to get from Hillary Clinton. And she is promising to stack a Supreme Court that will annihilate many of the fundamental free speech and religious liberty rights that people of faith and conservatives have taken for granted in this country for over 2 centuries. So I think people need to get over it, understand the stakes. Because this is about the Supreme Court, it's not about the next 4 years, it's about the next 40. And we need to fill the Supreme Court with a majority that will respect the First Amendment and religious liberty.
Mm-hmm. Then my final question, how can our viewers pray for the people at First Liberty Institute and the lawyers who are going to have to fight this decision for who knows how long?
Pray for wisdom, pray for courage, pray that for people of faith to have courage to continue to stand out, and pray for the Supreme Court and for the state Supreme Courts on this issue. I mean, this rule is an anti-Christian, fascist censorship regime, and it needs to be stopped before it gets going. And then if for states that do adopt it, if any do, we need a U.S. Supreme Court that will ultimately strike this down. And people need to be thinking about that as they decide whether they're going to vote and how they're going to vote. Again, with First Liberty not able to endorse or oppose any of the candidates involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, and I really hope that y'all are able to successfully fight this.
Well, if your viewers go to firstliberty.org, they can continue to follow our efforts as we're fighting for their rights and our ability to fight for all of them going forward.
Thank you.